For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. Hiking strips you down. Not just your body, but your ego too. Out there under the weight of the sun and your own breath, there's no pretending. Every step uphill is earned. Every drop of sweat is a tax paid to the trail. It's pure, it's brutal. And for the ones who love it, it's the closest thing to freedom they'll ever taste. But to many, they let ambition drag them deeper into the heat, farther up the slope, long after the warning signs have started. That's when things go bad. Heat doesn't kill you with drama, it kills you with silence. It sneaks up while you're still smiling, still pushing. One minute you're hiking, next, you're sitting down to rest and never getting up again. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness where survival is earned, not given. This is Outdoor Disasters. For Robert Liebler, his mountain hike would be a debacle. The 64-year-old Robert Liebler was no ordinary hiker. He had spent decades buried in the abstractions of mathematics, crafting cryptographic systems for the government, the kind designed to vanish behind locked doors and unreadable symbols. Since 1972, he taught at Colorado State University, a quiet fixture of intellect and precision. His companion, Veit Elser, taught physics at Cornell, sharp, analytical, and in peak condition in his later years. Both men were thinkers, not thrill seekers. But this trail, this mountain, promised a different kind of challenge. In July of 2009, they found themselves in Palm Springs, California, consulting for a local think tank. Between meetings and work, Veit and Bob, drawn by the ruggedness of the desert, proposed a climb. Skyline Trail, straight up Mount San Jacinto. It's not a casual hike, it was one of the most brutal ascents in the country. Over 10,000 feet or 3,000 meters of elevation, with no water sources, relentless exposure, and sweltering summer heat. Still, at 3 a.m. on July 18th, the two men laced up their boots and began the ascent from just above the Palm Springs Art Museum. The city lights glimmered below like an invitation to turn back. They didn't. They believed it would be just another hike, like the dozens they'd taken over the years, difficult, sure, but manageable. What they hadn't counted on was the heat, already rising even in the dark. The early miles were steep and unforgiving. Their pace slowed. The desert, barely visible in the pre-dawn, held a stillness that wasn't peace, but warning. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the temperature was rising. The trail was a mix of dust and stone twisting up through bone-dry scrub. Their water was being drained, and the hardest miles were still ahead of them. The mountain loomed above them, quiet and endless. And somewhere on this mountain, hidden in heat shimmer and rock, doom was looming for Bob Liebler. On this mountain, on this brutal trail, he would face something that would be too much to overcome. High above the desert floor of Palm Springs rises Mount San Jacinto, a granite colossus thrust skyward from the lowlands by ancient forces. It is the second highest mountain in Southern California, towering at 10,834 feet or 3,302 meters, and one of the steepest escarpments in North America. In a matter of miles, it rises more than 2 vertical miles, or approximately 3.2 kilometers, from the desert floor below. From certain angles, it looks less like a mountain and more like a wall. A great, impassable wall of rock and pine. The most direct route up is the Skyline Trail, also known as the Cactus to Clouds Trail. It begins behind the Palm Springs Art Museum and ascends to an elevation of over 10,000 feet over a distance of approximately 16 miles or 26 kilometers. It is widely regarded as one of the most challenging day hikes in America. There is no water on the trail, no shade in the lower section. It's not marked. Hikers must find their own way through switchbacks that fade into chaparral, then disappear into the forest. Many underestimate it. They think it's just a hike. However, they often forget that the desert heat below can start at 90 degrees before sunrise. They forget that as they climb, the oxygen thins, and every step becomes heavier. Rescue teams from Riverside County know the trail well. They've plucked dehydrated hikers off ridges and recovered bodies from ravines. There are no bailout points, no easy turnarounds. Once you're halfway, it's often safer to keep going than to turn back. At the summit, on a clear day, you can see all the way to Mexico. You can look west and see the Pacific, or east and trace the Colorado River through the haze. The wind up there is cold and sharp. The air is thin and clean. And the silence, if you make it, is complete. But not everyone does. The sun rose over the little San Bernardino Mountains and spilled its light across the canyon's flanks. Shadows shrank. The heat began to rise rapidly. Already the trail burned underfoot. They were less than a quarter of the way up. Liebler was struggling. His breathing was shallow now. His skin had gone blotched, shiny with sweat that wasn't coming fast enough. He moved slower, then stopped. One hand on his knee, shoulders bent, eyes blank and fixed on nothing. Elser turned and waited. "You all right?" Liebler didn't answer, just nodded vaguely. There was no shade, no cell signal. No one else is on the mountain. They kept walking slowly. Then Liebler winced, his leg locked. Cramp. He winced again and said nothing. Elser stopped. "Maybe this isn't such a great idea," he said. The sun was up now. The temperature was rising like something lit from beneath. They turned around, started back down, but Robert stopped again, looked out over the desert like he could see all the way back to the start. "This is silly. We're almost back to the bottom. Don't let me ruin this for you," Robert said. There was something final in his voice, a kind of quiet pride, like a man not willing to be carried. Elser hesitated, then nodded. They stood there for a moment on the slope, not saying much, just two old friends in the middle of nowhere. Around 6 a.m., they parted ways. Elser turned and climbed. Liebler turned and descended. The trail forked, one man up, one man down. Hours later, Elser reached the top and met the others as planned. They asked about Robert. Elser told them the story. Said he'd turned back. Said he'd probably be back in Palm Springs by now, resting in the cool of the hotel. But when he called, no answer. He tried again. Nothing. Elser felt something shift in his gut, a pressure he couldn't name. He descended on the tram, took a cab straight back into the desert heat. Searched the parking lot, the hotel, the trailhead. No Robert. Afternoon became evening. That's when Elser called the authorities. The sun went down over the Coachella Valley and the search for Robert Liebler began. The search began again Sunday morning. Sheriffs and rangers moved up and down the Skyline Trail, combing rock and scrub with the slow urgency of men who had done this before. They swept the main trail. They fanned into the gullies and arroyos. They looked where the trail thinned and vanished. The sun was already punishing. By 11 a.m., 36 hours after Robert Liebler had turned back, a Palm Springs police officer moved through the lower slope near Tahquitz Canyon. He stepped over pale rock and heat-shattered brush. Then he saw it. The body lay slumped on its left side, still as stone. Tan shirt, tan shorts, tan socks, brown hiking boots, the color of the desert. It blended into the earth. A man made of dust and sweat and silence. 75 feet off the trail, a mile from the museum, maybe less. 100 feet west of Arenas Road and South Tahquitz Drive. Palm Springs was right there, close enough to see the rooftops, to hear the hum of cars. The officer approached. There was no doubt. It was him, Bob Liebler, 64 years old, mathematics professor, patriot, friend. He was seated, knees bent, spine curved, like a man who had simply sat down to rest and never gotten up again. His backpack was still on. Inside were water bottles, food, a wallet, and a phone. The phone still worked. It had service. He never called for help. It took the Riverside County Coroner's Office days to match the body's fingerprints with any on file. It had to be rehydrated post-mortem to verify the match. Coroners ruled Liebler's death was due to heat stroke from environmental exposure, but the trail had said something else, that a man could die just a breath away from salvation, with water in his pack, a cell phone in his grasp, and not even know he was already gone. It was 119 degrees on the mountain that day, a dry, searing heat that felt like standing inside an oven with no door. the kind of heat that strips the moisture from your body with every breath. At those temperatures, survival isn't about strength, it's about time. And time was running out for Bob. People think they'll know when they're in danger, that their bodies will give them some kind of warning. But that's the cruel trick of dehydration. It doesn't scream, it whispers. The symptoms start with dry lips, a headache, and maybe some muscle cramps. You sweat less. Your pulse climbs. But your mind, the part that's supposed to recognize the signs, begins to dull. You feel tired, then confused. Your judgment goes. By the time you realize you're in trouble, you're already in the spiral. Probably why Bob didn't make the call or try to hydrate with the water he had left. He was disoriented. His muscles were likely aching, his legs trembling from hours of exertion. Maybe he cramped up again. Maybe he just needed a break. So he sat down in the shade of a rock, or what looked like shade, and closed his eyes. What he didn't know, what no one ever does until it's too late, is that the human body doesn't just shut off like a switch. It cooks. As the core temperature rises above 104 degrees, organs begin to fail. Blood thickens, the heart struggles, the brain swells. Hallucinations can set in. Many victims don't scream or panic. They go quiet, peaceful even. Bob probably thought he was just resting. He probably never realized he was slipping into heat stroke. He likely lost consciousness, his body shutting down in the oppressive heat, and then he died less than a mile from safety, in silence, under that merciless sun. No rescue, no final message. Just heat, then silence, then death. Just after 9 a.m. that same Sunday, while search teams scoured the rugged hills behind the Palm Springs Art Museum for the missing professor, another grim discovery was made. At 9:14 a.m., members of the Palm Springs Mounted Search and Rescue came across a second body. This one lying on the sun-scorched, jagged slope, not far from where Liebler would later be found. It was William Carroll, 65, a local man from Palm Springs. His remains were badly decomposed, a sign he'd likely been there for days, claimed by the same unforgiving heat. Carroll and Liebler would become the second and third confirmed fatalities on the trail that summer, both victims of a landscape that punishes even the smallest misstep under the desert sun. The fatal mistake that led to Bob's death was choosing to hike in the brutal heat of a Palm Springs summer day, when temperatures soared to 116 degrees Fahrenheit. To his credit, he began the climb well before dawn, an attempt to beat the worst of the heat. But the mountain had other plans. As the sun rose and the desert turned into a furnace, he found himself in a trap. Descending meant dropping back into the full blast of midday heat, with no shade and no margin for error. Bob was no fool. A man of intelligence, a professor, someone who'd spent years working on complex problems for the U.S. government. But intellect alone doesn't guarantee survival. Not when you're up against the raw, indifferent power of nature. Even the brightest minds can make fatal errors when they underestimate the land, the heat, and the limits of their own bodies. He didn't plan to die that day. No one ever does. But now Bob is more than just a memory. He's a warning, a grim reminder that the wilderness doesn't care how smart you are, what degrees you hold, or who you worked for. Out there, under a searing sun and on bone-dry trails, every decision carries weight, and one mistake, just one, can cost you everything. Bob's story ends quietly, alone on a hillside just short of safety. His last moments likely came with no panic, no realization, just stillness. And now, his name is etched into the rocks and dust of Palm Springs as a cautionary tale. Nature doesn't forgive the unprepared. It buries them. The sun won't go easy on you just because you're tired. Your body shuts down not because you're weak, but because it has had enough. Hiking in extreme heat is deadly. It tricks you. You think, I've done worse. But this isn't about grit, it's about biology. Hiking in extreme heat is one of the most dangerous things you can do in the outdoors. Before you ever step onto the trail, you need to understand this. Heat doesn't give second chances, If you're planning to hike in extreme temperatures, anything 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius and up, you are already operating in a danger zone. That danger compounds fast when you're exposed, without shade, and gaining elevation. Start early, pre-dawn if you can. You want to get the hardest miles done before the sun starts bearing down. Once it's 10 or 11 a.m., heat radiates off the rock and sand like a furnace from below. If you're still in the lower elevations by then, you're too late. Hydrate heavily the day before. Don't wait until the hike to start drinking water. You want your body topped off long before you begin. During the hike, drink small amounts frequently, even if you're not thirsty yet. By the time you feel thirsty, dehydration has already started. Carry more water than you think you'll need. At least 1 gallon, 4 liters for a moderate hike, and 2 or more for longer or exposed trails. Electrolytes are critical too. Water alone won't save you if your sodium levels crash. Pack salty snacks or electrolyte powders and use them often. Wear the right clothing. Light-colored, breathable, long-sleeved shirts can protect your skin from direct sunlight while keeping you cooler than bare skin. A wide-brimmed hat can save you from sunstroke. Sunglasses protect your eyes, and a wet bandana around your neck can help regulate temperature. Pace yourself. Heat will crush your energy faster than any uphill. Don't rush. Rest in the shade often, even for just a minute. Every break is a fight against the clock of your core temperature rising. Know the signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. If you start feeling dizzy, nauseous, confused, or if your skin stops sweating despite feeling hot, you're in danger. That's not just discomfort. It's your body beginning to fail. If you feel yourself fading, stop immediately. Get to shade or create your own using your backpack or a reflective blanket. Loosen your clothing. Let your body breathe. Sip water slowly. Don't chug it all at once. Pour water on your skin and fan yourself. Evaporative cooling can lower your body temperature. Lie down flat and elevate your legs if dizzy or weak. If you've stopped sweating and your skin is dry and hot, you're in heat stroke, and that's life-threatening. You need medical help fast. If you have a phone and service, call immediately. If not, rest, cool down, and do not attempt to hike uphill. Your body is already in a critical state. The bottom line, know when to turn back. Your pride won't matter if you collapse a mile from the trailhead and never get up again. The mountain isn't going anywhere. Don't let pride and ambition lead you straight into the jaws of an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.